Dominic, thank you so much for joining me, although I really want to call you Virgil.
It's a pleasure to be here, Maria.
You don't mind if I call you Virgil, do you?
No, no, that's fine.
I've made you blush. If anyone's listening to
You
the podcast,
have
I have
already.
made Dominic blush. And I'll tell you why we're talking about Virgil. It was in the introduction that you starred in Thunderbirds. And and I know that you actually use that in some of your speaking as well. So let's start with that because people will be saying, what on earth has Thunderbirds got to do with business? Tell me.
Absolutely. My experience as an actor, as a theatre director, as a teacher at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art has really helped me codify what great communication looks like, sounds like, feels like. So that's been my kind of mission over the last 10 years as I left Tracy Island, came back down to earth and thought, how do we take these things that actors know and take for granted and actually share them with people in the real world so that they can have that level of impact, that create that level of engagement. So that's what it's all been about.
Fantastic. But I always think though, if you're trying to, learn from an actor is playing a part. You're not being you. Are you asking me in my communications to play a part?
No, and that's a really interesting distinction because what actors really do is they take bits of themselves and they turn those bits up or down depending on the role that they're given. So, if you have to get really angry about something, you're going, okay, what in my life made me angry, and how can I amplify that? I'm not a nasty person, but there are moments where I may have been. So can I turn that up? And if we think about that in a business context, we are different when we're around the table eating dinner with our family than when we are when we're in a business meeting around the boardroom table. And there are elements of both of those characters, if you like, that can be brought together to make your communication much more powerful. And if you think about you as a leader, as a salesperson in lots of different scenarios, if you have availability to those different parts of yourself, then you become much more effective.
And I suppose really in your life you are playing different roles. When you're in the family, you're the daughter or the son or the husband or the wife or whatever. And when you're at work, you might be the leader or yeah. So you are playing roles in your
Yeah.
life, aren't you?
and they and and they come from you, they come from your own experience. You're not pretending. There might be that little bit of kind of imposter syndrome that kicks in, or whatever that might be, but it's you have to take it from a place of truth. And if you can help those leaders to really think about how they show up in that way and how they have a larger canvas to paint on, then you start to see people being much more dynamic, much more engaging, and it becomes really exciting.
Okay, I love that. And I know that you've put all that together in this book that you sent me, but did not sign or dedicate. So I want a signature. I want to dedicate.
That's terrible.
It's dreadful, Dominic. So you wrote this book, and it's called Impact. And there's a
It is.
reason that you called it Impact. Can you share that with us? Because we might be able to get some great knowledge from that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So impact is an acronym, stands for intention. So what do you want people to know? What do you want people to feel? And I think that's so important in communication, whether that's sales, whether that's leadership, whether that's, with your family. What do you want people to feel, and what do you want people to do? M is mindset. So how do you control some of those little voices in your head? And we all have them from time to time. The P is for presence. So that is, literally, how do you show up physically? What do you look like, sound like? Vocal presence is a big thing now, especially as we move into this virtual world. You have to be able to land your message down the telephone line or down the Zoom call. The A in the model is about audience. So who are they? How do you flex your style to be able to speak their language? Because there's no point in just going at it from your own perspective. You've got to be able to translate what you're saying into words and metaphors that other people understand and that they can buy into. C is for content. And I'm a great believer as an actor that actually in business, we shouldn't be learning a script. that actors get paid a huge amount of money to get good at learning lines and make it look like they're speaking those words for the first time. And they spend a lot of time rehearsing doing that. In business, we don't want to be doing that. We want to have frameworks that we can work with, that things that are scaffolding, if you like. They're in our back pocket and we can plug them into the different situations that we find ourselves in. And then the T in the model, the final piece of the jigsaw for me, is technique. It has to be authentic. So you have to go and build those muscles. There's no point in pretending to be someone else. It has to be you, but the best version of you.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. That's a masterclass in an answer. And do you know, I'm finding myself saying this more and more often when I have a guest on, because you're all so good. That's so good. I love that. But I've also got lots of questions as a result of that coming out of it. One of them you referred to earlier about the fact that we're all virtual at the moment. We're all on Zoom, and I suspect we probably will be for some time longer. And obviously there are other platforms available too, but Zoom, I am available for any kind of financial compensation. I've mentioned you several times, but no, seriously, we're communicating virtually. Are there any tips? I mean, does this apply to any type of format? Can you do this virtually too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it becomes that almost more important because the overall picture, if you like, is so diminished. So if you think about your average virtual meeting, all of a sudden, if you were sitting around the table, you take up a certain amount of space. You've got your chair in the room. You look at that on a screen and suddenly we become these tiny little heads floating in the middle of nowhere. And then oftentimes people add a slide deck to that, and then the slides are huge and they're even smaller, and we completely lose that sense of impact. So understanding, planning, preparing for communication in a virtual world becomes absolutely more important almost than it was face to face.
Yeah, excellent. And also, of course, the acting and the broadcasting and all that experience is even more relevant when you're on a small screen, isn't it?
You've got to be able to bring it to life. And, unfortunately, there are many, many meetings going on right now where people are switched off, they're dialed out, they're looking at their mobile phones, they're checking Facebook, because the person who is responsible for the message at this moment is not able to capture their imagination. So we're seeing organizations losing sales, having pitches that should have been right within their grasp that disappear because they couldn't create that connection with their audience. You've got leaders whose teams don't know what direction to move in because that person is unable to inspire and to motivate. So actually these things are so important right now.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And something else you said when you were talking about the impact model is the fact that actors rehearse, 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 rehearse. So it's like it's coming out for the very first time, but we shouldn't be scripting ourselves. We should have a framework, you were saying. Should we rehearse, 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 rehearse?
I think it depends on the context. So if I'm working with a client and they're speaking at their annual conference, for example, then absolutely you should be rehearsing that. And people under rehearse, so people think that they can rehearse things in their head and then they open their mouth and something completely different comes out. So it's about creating a muscle memory. You have to know what it feels like to speak the words aloud. So that's the first thing. If you're not in one of those formal situations, there's still a place for rehearsal. But for me, that's rehearsal around the framework. So that is I've got 5 messages that I want to land. I'm going to start here. This is my beginning. This is the middle. This is the end. But what goes along the way can be a bit more fluid. So thinking about it like an improvisation rather than a scripted performance. And what happens with those great improvisers is that they know the rules of the game. They know what has to happen, what is allowed and what isn't allowed in order to get that outcome. So you may be watching someone improvise and think, God, this looks completely chaotic and wonderful. But that actor knows they've got points that they're hitting. They understand what they can and can't say in reply, and that's happening in the background. And if we can move towards that in a business context, you can still rehearse that, you can still go out and try it out, but actually it's much more engaging when you're in free flow.
Okay, as we are today.
Exactly. Yeah. Wouldn't it be awful if we had sat there and rehearsed this and were speaking words off a script? You lose that humanity. I think you don't get to peel back the curtain and find out who that person really is.
And it's interesting you're talking about that because I think also from a speaker's point of view, so not just communicating in business, but also for speakers, I think you have to be much more it has to be like a conversation rather than one way, and certainly more interactive in this current environment. And part of that, I think, is the whole idea that everybody's saying is important. And in fact, you're a very talented storyteller. The fact that you need to tell stories, and I mean, from children's times, we've always loved stories. We love the story of Thunderbirds and Virgil Tracy. That's a great story. So talk to me about why it's so important, and are we still not getting that message? Are we still not using stories enough?
I think people misunderstand the power of story and misunderstand what the kind of key ingredients are of story. So if you're really going to tell a story, you have to engage people's imagination. A story is not just a string of facts put together to create a linear narrative. You have to create pictures in people's minds. They have to be able to imagine for themselves either what it looked like or imagine themselves being there. And when you get that right, you bypass that kind of conscious brain, the barriers that people put up, and you're able to talk to them again on a more human level. And as you say, it's something that we're used to since we were first learning to talk. We heard the bedtime story, we fell in love with the Disney characters, we go to the cinema as a way of release, we go and binge on a Netflix series when we want to feel good. And so as a communicator, if you can tap into that, that is so powerful.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. You're absolutely right. I do want to ask you a question, which is a little bit off piste, but I'm dying to ask you because you're an actor. You must have faced a lot of rejection as an actor because we all know, even from outside of that world, that a lot of people go for roles and then get rejected time and time again.
It's brutal, yeah.
How do you handle that? And are there any techniques that we can use or anything you can help us if we get rejected? Say on a date, we might get rejected, or for a job, or that, what can we do to help us with that?
So I think that part of it is about staying present in all moments, because it's so easy as an actor to walk into that audition and project yourself forward to the moment where you're lifting the Oscar and receiving the applause from the audience. And actually you have a job to do in that moment. And I always thought my job as an actor was as a salesperson. I had to go in and sell myself to the director and the casting director. The fact that I could act was sort of taken for granted. I was there, I was in the room, they were prepared to see me, so they wanted to buy into me. But in terms of that rejection, if you can stay present, if you can stay in that moment, it makes it much easier to rationalize what's going on. And the other thing that we're massive fans of in our house is the 2-minute rule, essentially, that you can get upset about it, you can stamp your feet and cry and really get frustrated and invest in that, have a good blub if you need to, but after 2 minutes, that's in the past. You've got to pick yourself up and move yourself on. And I always protected myself from those situations as an actor by thinking, okay, well, what's next? This is just one of many opportunities. There are so many roles going. There are so many sales deals to be had. There are so many jobs to go for within your own organization or outside of it. This is just today. So stay present, have a little bit of a kick and scream for no more than 2 minutes, and breathe. That's the other thing.
I like that. I like the, the stay present thing, which is actually so hard to do. It is
It
really
is, yeah.
hard because, as you say, you're thinking about, holding the Oscar, or you're thinking about working alongside some actor you've really respected, or you're thinking about, you immediately, and there's always the joke when you see a woman first meeting a man, she's imagining the wedding dress and the wedding day, and
Yeah.
we all do project into the future. It's absolutely true. Um, so that's great, and I love this 2 minute rule. I think I'd need longer than that, though. I'm not sure 2 minutes is long enough for me.
That's the
I'd need a bit.
Italian in you, you see.
Yeah, I need a longer tantrum. I need a longer time. But again, on the acting, what would you say is the biggest lesson you learned in your time as an actor?
That's a, I think the biggest thing for me actually was something that I learned from Ben Kingsley, which was focus. I remember being on set with him and watching the way that he interacted with the cast and the crew, and he's incredibly professional, as you'd imagine, but he was actually very contained. So he kind of kept himself to himself, but then he delivered those moments of magic when he stepped out onto the soundstage and the director shouted action, and poof, all of a sudden you are just with him in that moment. And it is that ability to stay hyper focused at the task at hand. And that applies, whatever your job is. I'm a magpie. I kind of like see shiny things and get distracted all of the time. And so that really rings in my ears. Focus, focus, focus.
Yeah, I like that. And what a good bit of name dropping there. Well done. Um, so listen, one of your speech topics is playing the leading role. And I know you can deliver that in various formats, not just as a talk. What is it that you cover in that for leaders? What can leaders learn about playing the leading role?
So actually, from my perspective, that there are three things that people should be thinking about. Focus is one of them, and I think as leaders, especially, it's so easy to start kind of micromanaging and getting into the detail, and people need you to be able to step back. And that was what Ben Kingsley was doing so brilliantly. He wasn't trying to set up the lighting or worry about his makeup. He just played his part. So that's a big part of leadership for me. Awareness is absolutely crucial. It's so often that I meet leaders that don't understand the impact that they're having on their direct reports. They assume that there's something wrong with him, and they're not looking back at themselves in the mirror and saying what's going on with me. So once you develop that awareness, and that's a kind of the first building block of being an actor, really, you have to understand yourself in order to be able to play someone else. And I think as a leader, you have to be able to understand how you work before you can start to plug into other people and get them to work for you. And then the third piece of the jigsaw is bravery. It's vital that we take risks if we're going to do anything interesting, if we're going to be able to innovate, if we're able to inspire other people, we have to make ourselves vulnerable. We have to be open to that possibility of failure. And I think the businesses where exciting things happen are the businesses where that level of bravery is really encouraged. They say, the whole kind of Google idea of take 20%, go and mess around with some stuff and come back and see what happens. No consequences. That's when great stuff happens. So focus, awareness, and bravery.
Okay, so this leads me to my final question, and I wonder if it's true or this is something that you have picked up. So obviously Thunderbirds, we started with Thunderbirds, we're ending with Thunderbirds. I was going to ask you, what does FAB stand for? You said focus, awareness, bravery. Is that what it stands for on Thunderbirds?
No, I hope I don't burst any bubbles right now, but FAB in a Thunderbirds context stands for absolutely nothing. We kind of tried in rehearsals to work out, what what the letters could stand for. There's a little, if you are a fan of the film, there's a little moment where the camera pans across Jeff Tracy's desk, and there's a photo of the 5 younger Thunderbird brothers, and underneath it says 5 adorable boys. So that's the only reference, but I think, you know, it's fabulous.
I think it's fabulous. And Dominic, it's been FAB talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.